really short break, but so I've just kickstarted recording. So without further ado, over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And really, I just wanted to give a shout out to Ambesh and Nicholas there. So for those people who don't know, I moved over to West Coast in Vancouver at the start of the year. And so it was like 6:30 in the morning, and I was lucky enough to catch their sessions, and they were fantastic. So both of you have set a really high bar. So fingers crossed I pull this off. So thanks so much for giving me the opportunity to present this. I really wanted to really present a session that looked at some of the fundamental concepts and really some of the strategic decisions and questions that us as consultants and architects really need to ensure that we're driving to our customers. And obviously also if you're not in a partner, this is also still relevant for you because for those of you who are developing these experiences internally, these are also applicable to you as well. These are things that you really should be thinking about when you're developing your strategic kind of approach to delivering customer experiences. And Nicholas really did mention this really well in the previous session, where when he was talking about omnichannel and how really it is a journey. You don't just suddenly become kind of like omnichannel competent and enabled. As such, you really do need to think about certain things. So I really wanted to create that session that looked at those fundamental concepts. So as I said, I moved from the UK over to Vancouver. I'm a lead architect. I work with Hitachi Solutions, and I've been a BizEps MVP for around 5 years now. One of the things I am very passionate about is customer service, of course, within Dynamics 365. And as part and parcel of that, that includes the Power Platform, of course. And I've also got a little bit of a pet hobby with AI. So I used to actually be a programmer. I used to do C# quite regularly for a number of years. So I'm trying to pick that back up again because there is a certain level of control and kind of flexibility you get with coding. It's something fun, and I do enjoy that. So that's just a little bit of a pet hobby. And I've got my second edition book coming out in the next few months that I wrote a few years ago on the Common Data Service. So that's all been updated. I will put some links in there as well. I will be doing some giveaways at some point. And obviously speaking at this session today, but I've been speaking on a range of different topics for really as long as my career's been active. So, but of course, everyone can improve. So I really want some feedback from everyone today. And if you are watching the recording, definitely just hit me up on Twitter, and all of my handles are there as well. So please do reach out to me if you do have any questions at all, what you see today or hear today. And really, if you have any questions or suggestions of content, definitely would love to hear that as well. So one of the things I really wanted to start out with is really understanding the life cycle of business, really. I kind of wanted to start this out. And for those of you who are familiar with Dynamics and familiar with, if you've ever worked with anything, probably CRM 2011 or earlier, you'll probably really appreciate this slide. Because a lot of people or a lot of businesses would approach essentially business in this way. It would really be start with marketing, start with sending out a few emails or probably letters back in that day, and then you would get a sale. It would then create the lead or the opportunity, depending if you're using leads. And then service was something that would always be an afterthought. It'd always be something that it would be, okay, you've created like a service ticket and you've created that case. Let's try and solve that problem. And it was quite a linear a cycle. It was something that wouldn't really be diverse. It wouldn't really kind of support anything outside of this kind of process. And really, like I said, for those people who have worked with Sierra in 2011, we're in 2020 now, right? And the actual real thing is the fact that business doesn't operate like this anymore, and it hasn't for quite some time. We've been in this transition period where things have changed, and we can no longer look at service, especially and that customer service, as an afterthought. And I'm sure everyone on the call, you'll have experiences where you have felt like it's been an afterthought, and it's just not a nice experience. It's when businesses are still in this quite archaic model, it definitely stands out in a negative way. And this is one of the reasons why I really wanted to create this session today, is to really go through some of these things and how businesses can move out of this very old way of thinking and move into a lot more of a modern customer service strategy. Now, business is a little bit different now, right? So we've actually got, so where marketing was actually like kind of that first approach and, that kind of uh, initial touch point, whether that's an email or a letter, it's actually changed somewhat to become more of brand awareness. And you'll find this talked about so much with industry leaders and people, even marketing agencies, where it's all about your brand image and that customer experience as that whole. And you can see marketing is no longer just that first step. Marketing is actually continuous. And we'll all experience this just by scrolling through our feeds on our phone. We're all very active on Twitter, and as you like kind of push up and start scrolling, you'll see things like promoted tweets, and you'll do the same thing in LinkedIn. And that is the brand awareness. That is marketing. Those people have paid to get their content there. And Google and search engines are no different. Sure, you've got search engine optimization, but you've got paid ads. And so there's lots of different things that marketing go through now that go well beyond just sending basic emails. Now, with that in mind, you can see that that literally spans from the left to the right of the screen. It is continuous. And you can also see service has done the same. Service is no longer an afterthought. Service is actually something that many people go to an organization and actually have questions before they decide to shell out the cash. So, especially if you're looking to buy something large like a car or even looking at something like a house. I'm looking at buying a bike at the moment and they're not cheap, right? And I've been asking some questions of some potential companies I'm going to purchase from, and some of them have not even come back to me. I'm not going to be purchasing something from an organization that has a very slow response time and really doesn't even get back to me with my questions when I'm going to be dropping a lot of money. And that is essentially the mindset of a lot of consumers now, and also organizations are starting to shift with that response. And in actual fact, you might be wondering, where's the sale, right? The sale's everywhere. So there's no distinct point of sale anymore. You can go ahead and someone can go walk into an actual like a car dealership, and they can go ahead and just drop the money straight away, like in a day. They've had one meeting, they've just bought a car in a day. Whereas that can actually sometimes take a considerable amount of time and a number of months. Now, of course, this completely depends on the industry that you're working in and the actual product that you're selling. If I'm going to walk into a retail store, it's very likely that I'm probably going to be walking out with something compared to something like a very, very expensive car. But that's still not to say that that doesn't happen anymore. And that is because of this shift in business, the shift in the fact that marketing is continual. It's very subtle now as well. It's not necessarily just as blatant in your face as just an email. It's actually being pertinent throughout your day. Now, the focus of this session is actually on the service element of this, right? And this is where I wanted to be very distinct, because when we talk about customer experience does include that marketing and that brand awareness, but there's such a huge underpinning of customer service in that. I always teach and kind of explain customer service is almost a subset of customer experience. Customer experience includes customer service, but not just that alone. And customer service is serving customers, and this is where that business concept has changed. Organizations need to be capable of serving customers at any stage in the life cycle now. And remember, it's also not just about getting that initial sale, it's about the continuation of that as well. And this is where that linear process, once you just got a sale, you don't just say, cool, job done, I'm gonna finish up now and go to my other new customer. There's been lots of studies to show that it's actually very easy, or a lot easier, to go ahead and actually sell to your existing customers compared to getting new ones. So this is going to be the focus of the session today. It's really going to be looking at that service and how it can support that marketing and that sales process in business, and really some of those strategic concepts that you need to be looking at. So I really wanted to look at deconstructing the actual title of the session, and why this is so important. So the title of the session is about creating useful and meaningful customer experiences. And there's a few people on the call today, and you're all going to have different definitions of this. I could have easily Googled some definitions of what, hey, let's have a look at what useful means and what does meaningful mean. But in actual fact, it's a moving target. And these will actually be very, very, very different, not just depending on industry, but actually depending on organization, because organizations, they like to think they're unique, even if they do take a blueprint from their industry, but ultimately they all have their own fundamental concept of why they're in business. But also, it actually varies from person to person. So, again, everyone on this call will all have very different definitions of what we would say is useful and meaningful. But not just that, it doesn't just stop at that person concept, it actually stops at the instance. So, for example, what could have been useful to me yesterday may actually not be useful to me now. And this is why it's so important to understand your customer. And we're going to be going into this a little bit later in the session about personas and actually understanding who your customer is. But in actual fact as well, it's not just important to understand that that's a moving target. These vary from person to person, day by day, but also depending on what you're trying to do for that customer. So what may actually be useful, perhaps I've got a query about a missing order. What could be useful there for me is to actually get a response from the company that I'm trying to chase my order down. Now, maybe I've got a leak in my shower, and what's going to be useful is not just response time, right? I kind of need that fix. That's a little bit more urgent than me just chasing an order. So, understanding the context of customer service is so important. And this is where, again, Nicholas did a really great job of explaining why omnichannel is really good for that. And we're going to be looking at some of the technology options that you've got as well in this framework. So before we get onto the framework, I really wanted to just explain what really underpins this framework. And there's really three pillars. And those three pillars are, they can be understanding the customer, understanding the business, and obviously the staff. And then in doing so, they both actually need to understand the technology. So let's just take this apart. In terms of understanding the customer, we really need to understand, what does the customer want that the organization has? What is that service being provided? And in doing so, how does that customer interact with the business? And this is again looking at the different channels that that organization can offer, but it obviously doesn't just stop at channels. It's actually, how does that organization actually implement those channels? Because ultimately, if the customer cannot understand, and if the customer does not know, or is so complicated to go ahead and interact with that business, the actual transact is not going to happen. So they will not be able to interact with the business, and therefore they will not be able to give that organization money. And whether that's purchase items or membership, whether it's about just simple questions, they're going to get blocked, and they're just going to go to, again, another organization that will sell something slightly different but the same thing, because the market has a lot of choice these days. And so that is something that is so critical to understanding the customer. And then let's look at it the other side. On the right-hand side, you can also look at it from the organization's perspective. So understanding the business is still the same importance of understanding the customer, except you've got to look at it from the other side. So who actually are the customer? Why do they want to buy the products from that organization? And also, what are their actual problems? I just wanted to just pause there. If someone's off mute, could everyone just mute themselves for just a moment? I think we're good. Cool. Sorry. So on the right hand side, so we're talking about understanding the business. So who do we want to buy our products? What are their problems, and what actually are you trying to solve by those problems? And then in terms of, what does the staff actually need to do to serve those customers? And this is, again, something that some of the previous sessions covered. So in terms of actually, though, like, one of the things that is very frustrating, and again, I'm sure everyone on the call has had a similar experience, is when you call a customer service department and you need to get some information, and the agent goes, I cannot get into that system. I cannot help you because I cannot get into that system. And this is where it comes, that the fact that the business really needs to understand the technology to be able to then, again, help them serve the customers so that they can transact and they can solve those questions and issues. So you can see how these pillars really do come together in terms of providing that fundamental framework. So this is what I wanted to give to you all today. Is it's essentially a starting point and a framework to go ahead and really have a collection of almost questions and tasks that you need to do to be able to create these useful and really meaningful experiences for your organization. And so the first thing that we're going to look at covering is really that, just that, what actually is useful and what is meaningful, and how do you find that out for your specific organization? The first thing you've got to ask is really just the question, what exactly is useful to the customer? And this is where it's going to be critical to understand your target market. And we talked a little bit about this in one of the previous slides, is actually understanding who the customer is and asking who do we want to buy, who essentially do we want to purchase our products? And you can go ahead and do that very easily by just creating personas. And as a consultant and an architect, you're going to be very familiar with doing this anyway with user stories. And it's something that is often overlooked and often basic, but to understand the actual person that's going to be using the product and where those service touch points are going to be is absolutely critical, because this is where you can then go ahead and understand what medium are they going to be using. So this may be something like maybe they commute to work every day and they're going to be actually using their mobile phone to go ahead and create service tickets and actually interact with your website. If you do not have the capability to go ahead and actually do that and achieve that, then your target market is not able to go ahead and interact with your organization and provide that level of service that they need to go ahead and purchase those products. And again, it's about what do they need? What's going to be their problems? What's going to be coming up for them as well? And this isn't too hard to do. Like I said, it's just about creating a persona, and you can go ahead and put as much time into this as you want. But really, using this fundamental framework, there's a lot of different guides on the internet there as well that you can use and go ahead and just Google. But really, let's just take a look at an example persona. Let's just take a look at Mary, right? What you would need to ask about Mary is what are her demographics? Where like what kind of education has she got? What career has she got? Because again, you've got to look at the different types of product that you're selling. What does her typical day look like? Someone who works perhaps in a warehouse or perhaps on a boat, or perhaps is someone like an air stewardess, is going to have a very, very, very different day and very different problems to someone who works in an office, for example. What does their family look like? And then this will actually all inform your next set of questions is like, what does she looking for? What kind of problems does she have in her life? And how does that really translate to then obviously your organization? But then what's actually going on with the person and their challenges? What are they responsible for? And then really the next set of questions is then really all again trying to build this picture of Mary. What does she do? What are her hobbies? And then really then you start to get down to the detail. And one of the fundamental questions I always find really helpful when building these personas is what actually other organizations and brands do they use? And then this is why you can really get an amazing picture of what Mary's experiences are going to be like. So about 3 slides ago, we looked at that deconstruction of what actually is a useful and meaningful experience. And we talked about how they can vary from person to person. One of the reasons that happens is because of the expectations we all have. So we all go into a scenario or an experience with it with a certain degree of expectation. And that's not dissimilar to customer service. So when I email somebody, I'm going to have an expectation of when they should be responding to me. And again, you all on the call today are going to have other expectations as well, but they may be different from mine. And the reason that they may be different is because of lots of different factors, but one of them being is that our expectations could have been set by another organization. And so if someone's providing full omni-channel experiences, for example, and another organization is failing to get back to me within even a week, that's going to look very, very bad for that second organization because I've had such an amazing experience with the first. And so that is absolutely critical to understand how they interact in with other organizations. And then the other fundamental question is again, where do they live on the internet? So where are they hanging out? Because again, this is going to determine a lot of your channel decisions. Because as Nicholas kind of went through omni-channel, there are so many different ways of implementing customer service now, but you shouldn't just implement all of them. that's got to be the wrong thing to do. Not just expensive as well, but really, if you're implementing a channel where your customers don't even hang out, you're wasting company resources and really and money. You're not serving your customers at all. So it's about implementing and looking at those channels strategically. And to do so, you really need to understand, where does your target market kind of hang out. If they are very much social media based, so implementing that channel is going to be a no-brainer. Live chat, if they're going to be on your website. Whereas if they're not going to be using WhatsApp, don't go ahead and implement WhatsApp. So we've looked at the persona, which is great, but then we need to then ask ourselves a second question when we're understanding the customer. What exactly is meaningful? And this is again a very easy thing to do. You can go ahead and use even just the technology that you may even have with like Dynamics 365 for marketing, or even something as simple as Mailchimp. Just go ahead and ask them. I'm a very direct person anyway, in terms of I'll just go ahead and ask those questions. But we can go ahead and make assumptions and estimations for as long as we want to, but until we go and actually ask, we're kind of again living in the customer's world. You can go ahead and do user research with that. A really popular thing is A/B testing as well. If you did want to go into a bit more of an advanced kind of research kind of structure, focus groups are really good. And also, a lot of companies do use third-party market research firms. But again, it's not very hard to go ahead and do your own market research. As an organization unless you're a sole trader or a very small organization, market research is something that's kind of expected of really every organization. And then really then look at, again, that meaningfulness. What does that actually mean? Look at studies, do your research, and really understand right now how your brand and your why values as an organization are experienced. We will talk a little bit about organizational values at a later point as well. Now, when I said about doing your research, this is again something that's really simple. And this is just something that I did. It didn't take me long. I just went on the internet and did my research and just Googled some keywords that's going to be important. And you can see that you can go ahead and just find some really, really amazing statistics that are actually genuine, right? Gartner and Forrester are very reputable sources as well. But one of the things that I wanted to highlight is the quote from the Virgin Mobile and what Matt Anderson did. And this is, again, really, really important, because it's not just about kind of blending in with the crowd. It's actually saying, what do you want to do as an organization? Because this is about strategy. This is about, how do you want to implement your brand? How do you want your customer service to appear and show up for your potential customers? And for Matt, he actually wanted something completely different. He actually had, this vision for Virgin Mobile that wasn't just about kind of blending in with the rest of the industry. And in my experience as well, working with customer service implementations for a considerably long time, something that is absolutely critical is personal service. It's really funny talking to people because, as much as I'm a big fan of virtual agents, which we'll talk about shortly, things such as self-service is great. And bots are great, but people still need personal service. If there's a bot that's obviously very, very intelligent and can go ahead and get like information maybe from the CDS and all that kind of stuff, you can provide a bit more of a personal service. Even that can be described as personal service. But in actual fact, actually having that handoff over from Power Virtual Agent to Omnichannel, for example, to a real agent, is that personalized service. It's being able to ensure that we can really get to the specific problems of people without just providing a blanket response. And then the actual resolving of a query is really important. How many times have we been hung up on in customer service? How many times have we then had to go back and go through all the terrible IVR implementation of like 10 steps? And it's very, very frustrating. No one has time to deal with that these days. And so actually resolving the query, and you'll see when we go through some KPIs that the actual kind of, first call resolution is actually kind of a really big statistic in customer service, because, it means that you're not going to get more calls back when they've not resolved that question query. So we've discovered and really explored some things that you can do to look at what is actually useful and what is meaningful. So let's look at the next stage of the framework, which is all about organizational capability. and really about people. So we've looked at the customer, but now it's about taking the light and actually shining it on the actual business and the staff. And this is something that some of the previous presentations covered quite nicely as well, because it isn't just about the customers, it's actually about giving your organization the capability to meet those needs, because ultimately it's the staff that make those experiences useful and meaningful. And again, how do you actually go ahead and do this? And really, my answer is go ahead and ask them. Go ahead and use and really execute on the same kind of method that you did this with your customers, and just go ahead and ask them. This is something that many organizations just simply do not do. It's kind of it, and it makes me sad because I've worked in call centers, and I've worked in customer service pretty much most of my life, and it's something that a lot of organizations just don't do, and they implement technology onto staff. They don't include them in the discussion, and it's something that really affects user adoption. And really, they fundamentally then miss the problems that they're experiencing, and in doing so, it means that they cannot provide the service to then the customers that are actually providing the revenue stream for the organization. So please do not miss your staff. Your staff are the key to implementing your strategy, and go ahead and just ask them and provide some, even create those focus and research groups that include your staff, and try to find out how can we empower our staff to go ahead and implement what we're trying to achieve, that this experience we want our customers to have. Another thing is look at how are your staff actually measured for success. What does good job look like for them? And actually, does it match what you want your customers to receive? And then the next bit is about creating personas and journey maps, and take what you did in the previous step of actually understanding your customers, and actually map and track that to the same thing that you can do with your staff. Do the same thing, do personas, what's going on for them, how can we help them, how can we make them enjoy their day, and how can we help them serve the actual needs that we've identified for our customers. And then from the second thing that you can do as an organization is then, so we've looked at our, the staff, and now we need to look from an organizational level. And this is about understanding your current data. And I know that people will probably cringe when I say this, because no one likes to look at terrible data, and no one likes to do some deconstruction of, data that may be in separate systems. And it takes a lot of work, and when data is not clean, it isn't, I'm not going to lie to you, it's a terrible experience, but it's required. And so understanding this, and there's the two ways that I would recommend doing this, is go ahead and try and export it all out into Excel, even if they're different workbooks or sheets. Or you can actually go ahead and use customer service insights. Customer service insights, you do not have to have your data in the case entity. You can actually have them in other entities in CDS as well. So you can actually go ahead and map to different kind of relationship structures. But even if you was to go ahead and convert your data to the cases and to understand that, it still wouldn't hurt. But we'll get onto that a little bit later. But by understanding your data, what you can then really do is ask yourself a few different questions. You can say, how are we currently kind of interacting with our customers, and how are they interacting with us? So the reason why it's important to look at your data is because data, you can make inferences of your data, so you can make some like assumptions, and just be mindful of that you will have your own bias as well. Try to approach your data without your predetermined bias. But in essential, you've got data to back your business case up. And this is where, you're not going to be lying about, oh look, 80% of our cases are actually coming from social media. And you can unequivocally see that there's going to be no inferences there. So how to interact, how your customers are interacting with your business is so important. Things such as CSAT scores, you may even uncover that, hey, we're not even logging our CSAT scores. That's something that we'll talk about later as well. Things like resolution times, like what's taking the longest, what's the escalation rate. Some of these will be really hard if you're looking at things like Excel, and this is where customer service insights is always a recommendation, because it does it out of the box for you. You just need to get your data into that structure and map it, and it actually does some very powerful things. So definitely review your data, and what this does is it gives you information and it gives you knowledge, and knowledge is a huge amount of power in this scenario. So we've looked at covering some things that you can do to look at the organizational capability. So the next thing in the framework is really then looking at understanding the technology that's available. And this is a really interesting one. This is where we start to then actually look at what's what's in the market for the organizations. But before you do, the first thing to really look at is actually auditing your current customer service technology. And this is again a very this I really do encourage people to go with no bias when they do this. It's an audit. It's not a you're not recommending at this point. You're not really saying you hate certain things or anything like that. It's mainly more about understanding what have we got right now, and essentially what are we actually using. So what are we using as a business, and what are our customers using? You may have implemented something, I don't know, 5 years ago that you may find like two people use a month or something like that, and you need to be able to kind of do that. And one of the most useful things that customers have done in my experience is really go ahead and take those maps that you did from the two previous exercises for your customers and staff, and just simply make a list, tag the technologies that are used in that. And what you actually do then by doing so is you get a great list of technologies that you have, but then you can then start to identify, so we've got all of this technology. Do we have any missing things or gaps, or do we have any needs here that we've identified with our previous customer map and staff maps? And that's really, really important. And then the next step is really then looking at what actual technology is available. I referenced CRM 2011 really early on, and I always love doing that because it's the stark difference of how customer service was in 2011 and beyond to where it is now in 2020, because we literally just had the case entity. That's for those people who aren't familiar with customer service 2011. It was literally just the case entity. We had and KBI calls, okay, yeah, KBI calls, which were definitely not the KBI calls we see now. And so, service has absolutely changed, and is changed in technology as well. And so you can just see on this screen right now, and even just in today in the Dynamics 365 Saturday event, that the technology available is huge. And sometimes, it can be very overwhelming for organizations. But just as an overview, I really wanted to give you all a bit of an overview of some of the core technologies that are available. Some of the things that I won't cover in that much depth are things like embedded apps and integration, CTI integration, RPA. But I definitely see those as technologies you can utilize in the context of service. Things like RPA is such a huge up and coming technology that you can use to actually go ahead and move away from something like integration and look at automation instead. Embedded apps and Canvas apps are absolutely key for that customization element as well. And CTI integration is still important because phone is still a very valid channel that is not going to be going away anytime soon. And another thing that I won't cover in too much detail in the next few slides are cognitive services. If anyone hasn't looked at the Azure cognitive services, they are fantastic for customer service, and they really do provide a lot of capability beyond something like simple sentiment analysis. So just to kind of cover some of the technologies that are available that are in really that customer service that really enable organizations to take what we've looked at so far and really review that Microsoft Stack and Power Platform. So the first thing is Customer Service Hub. And again, it's changed from just the case entity. We've got, and it's still the case entity, but we've got so much more that is in out of the box customer service. And this is something that we do in customer service implementations always first. I always see this as foundational case management. And this is something that really is almost like an unsung hero, because it underpins everything that we know about managing service tickets. So you've got the case, and you've not just got that, you've got things like SLAs and service level agreements, and they've moved from being just something very basic to only being what we refer to as enhanced SLAs now. And you can essentially create any KPI you wish and go ahead and track that. You can track the time, you can track the warning, you can track the completion time. And essentially those service level agreements are one of those things that underpin a lot of customer service strategy elements, because I referenced it a little bit earlier on. If someone doesn't message me back within 5 days, that is not good. I'm not going to spend my money with you. So being able to actually identify that and track that and provide warnings and visual timers, absolutely critical. That's included. Being able to manage entitlements and actually paid service programs. So something like extended warranties and all that kind of good stuff, that's enabled out of the box. There's a huge wealth of features around entitlements and SLAs as well. knowledge articles, of course. So knowledge articles are not just a kind of wad of text now. There is so much cool stuff on knowledge articles. Not just have you got an actual end-to-end process to manage your beginning, middle, and end and publishing a vocabulary article, but you've actually got similar suggestions. So you can actually go ahead and take that case title, and out of the box, it would say, hey, we recommend this knowledge article for you. And then also, this, let's just not, I want to make sure we do this justice. You've also got out of the box machine learning models for knowledge articles as well. So we'll actually go ahead and learn what knowledge articles are used and actually go ahead and again offer much more advanced suggestions up. And that's just really I'm really just cutting the surface of this. There's so much more to the out of the box customer service hub, and I'm sure I'll probably do some foundational content on this because I just think it's not covered enough, because, some of the things that we've seen in omnichannel, it leverages so much of that foundational customer service experience that you really need to ensure that you've got a sound kind of process with your queues, with your routing rules before you go ahead and implement something like omnichannel. Now, talking of omnichannel and unified service desk, the first thing I wanted to cover is unified service desk. Now, a lot of people pitch unified service desk against each other with omnichannel, and it's not strictly true. Now, you can actually have both. You can actually have omnichannel inside unified service desk, and this is a bit of an old picture of USD. But a lot of the time with USD, it comes with the actual framework of it's the UII framework, and essentially it's the framework that allows some very complex customizations in call center environments to happen. Because essentially the call center is a huge volume of calls coming in, and it really is a bit more of a different scenario than just managing kind of like an email support queue. So Unified Service Desk offers a great capability for that kind of experience in that call center, with scripting, with like kind of the single pane of glass, with tabbed experience, all that stuff as well. Now, the thing that just to be mindful of with the Unified Service Desk is its own beast. It's a thick client, which means you need to install it on a machine, and it's not, it's not something that you go ahead. It connects to Customer Service Hub, but it's not something you can just access in the cloud. It does need to be installed. Now, I said that I don't really pitch omnichannel against USD because they offer two different things. Now, and again, if those of you who saw Nicholas's session, it's such a kind of different beast, but kind of similar. So I know that's kind of contradictory, but they both have the concept of session management, and this is kind of the key. And this is what Nicholas kind of drove home, is the fact that with omnichannel and USD, the concept of a session and managing a session from any channel, that's what both of them actually provide. Just omnichannel engagement does it in the cloud and does it with a bit more modern technology compared to USD. And again, there's different elements to both of them. But you can see there as well in that second screenshot on the top that you've got so many different channels that you can go ahead and use, and the time to actual implementation can be argued to be a lot quicker, because you can just go ahead and set this up and really go ahead and implement live chat on your website very, very, very quickly, without having that thick client, without having to have, again, those kind of policies and procedures in place to manage a thick client. Now, another thing that we referenced as well early on is being able to be aware of Power Virtual Agent. Now, I hope a lot of you have heard of this. I mean, if you haven't, it's not the end of the world, because now you're hearing about this. Power Virtual Agent is amazing. It's essentially takes the bot framework in Azure and really creates a low-code way of being able to deploy a bot. And you can deploy this anywhere. So you don't just have to deploy this on your website. You can actually deploy this in Teams. You can go ahead and really deploy this internally as well, like in an iframe. It's really amazing in terms of where you can put this. You can actually link this to omnichannel engagement very easily as well. I think I did a few blog posts on this, on how you can actually use that chat widget in omnichannel engagement and actually have your Power Virtual Agent talk in that widget and hand this over to a live chat agent in omnichannel engagement. And so they've really created the team that handles PVA has done such an amazing job in this. It's been around for a while. If those of you who followed it from the beginning, it used to actually be branded Dynamics, but then it obviously came part of the Power Platform. But you can see that it has a really simple way of branching and being able to manage that logic. And again, you don't have to know code. You don't have to, go ahead and use the bot framework. It actually handles so much stuff for you. In addition, it extends using Power Automate. So you can actually create a bot experience that is actual dynamic. So you can authenticate with someone, you can provide authentication details, and then you can actually go ahead and access their data. And again, this is not a real person. This is a bot doing this. So you can make some fantastic experiences with PVA and manage this via that topic level as well. If anyone hasn't checked this out, I think if there's one thing that you do from today's session, is really go and check PVA out, because it's such a great thing to get your head around. And again, Ambesh covered self-service portals in one of the previous sessions, and this is one of the biggest things for customer service, is to be able to implement the concept of self-service. I know for me personally, I do most of my transactions on self-service. I do not want to talk to someone. I don't have time to stay on the phone for half an hour. And I think that's the sentiment of a lot of people, is they just want to get the information like now. And I know that this is how the world has changed. And this is, again, comparing that to 2011 to 2020, is the organizations really do need to think about their self-service strategy. And this is building on that experience of that Power Virtual Agent. You need to have almost like a base of your portal, and then you need to ensure that you've got, then, you can go ahead and automate that with bots and with Power Virtual Agent, but then provide that personalized experience with that handoff to omnichannel engagement. Forms Pro is another element. We talked about CSAT a little bit earlier as well. This is a piece of technology that's available to many people in really actually Office 365 as well, with forms. And so you can get started very easily. It uses a lot of that native forms experience, but it is so easy to create something like feedback forms. And we talk a little bit about KPIs shortly, but this is absolutely critical to be able to implement that kind of full feedback cycle. I know I sound a little bit like Microsoft when I say about the feedback loop and stuff, but it's so true. If you do not, as an organization, have that kind of feedback, if you do not know how well you're doing, you're just going to keep doing what you're doing until your revenue starts to go and starts to decline, and your competitors start to kind of put you out of business. So you really need to ask how you're doing. It's not an alien concept. We all have to have feedback, and we have feedback from our managers, we have feedback from people, and if we haven't got that as an organization, then there's a bit of an issue there. And then finally, customer service insights. This is like, I really need to do a customer service insight session. I cannot speak highly enough of customer service insights. Customer service insights pulls everything together. Think about it like it's knits everything together that you have in your customer service strategy. And so you start with that foundational case management. It uses cases, or it can use cases. It doesn't have to. You can go ahead and map this, as I said earlier. But think about it, your foundational case management. It has your CSAT. It logs CSAT from your customer satisfaction field on your case. And then it also then looks at your resolutions. So what it then does is it surfaces and groups those elements. It uses natural language processing, which is basically just, it looks at the semantics of your issues that are being raised and groups them into similar topics. And you actually have access of that granularity, by the way. So you actually can go really, really high, really, really low. And you can then go ahead and get what you can see on the screen, which is suggestions for like, hey, these are the top topics that you have that are really affecting your customer service capability right now. Do you want to drill into them? And so that you can go ahead and start to then look at those topics that are perhaps taking the longest for your agents to resolve. You can look at the topics that are actually causing your CSAT to be a lot more negative than it should be. And then also, on addition to that, it really, how it works together with the stack is amazing. So I previously talked about how you can link Power Virtual Agent with Omnichannel and self-service portals. Customer Service Insights actually suggests the topics for you to automate using Power Virtual Agent. And this is great because then what it does is it brings these topics and actually says these would be really great candidates for you to automate and go ahead and create in PVA. And it'll actually, there's a button that like the little bot, the little PVA icon that will say, hey, take me to Power Automate and we'll go ahead and build this. And it will go ahead and actually provide a template for you. And that is just amazing. It really does. Microsoft have done a fantastic job about using customer service insights to knit these products together. So if, again, probably the second thing you do after PVA and check the free trial out of PVA, go check out Customer Service Insights. So we've looked at understanding technology, and understanding the technology on the market is really, really important. But now we just want to go ahead and just briefly cover the actual organizational values and mission statement. And this kind of seems, you might be like, this is kind of achingly basic and has nothing to do with customer service, Sarah. I would challenge you to think a little bit differently in that, because the understanding the organizational values and mission and statements are all about, again, we're broaching a little bit on that brand element that we were talking about with marketing, but that's still so important because, and this is the same as when we have an omni-channel experience. How can you deliver omni-channel, even if you have omni-channel engagement, even if you have all the technology, if your agents and if your staff are not displaying the fundamental organizational values and mission statements that your organization really exists for? And so you need to ensure that this strategy, it's you don't just implement technology first, and being able to actually understand where your organization is today and those areas of improvements is really, really important. So that customer service strategy, and how do you want to help the customer? And this really directly links to what your goals are as an organization. And to do this, another thing that you can do from a tool perspective is really then look at your customer experience maps and technology. So take a look at some of all the previous things that you've done and really then add in that actual customer feedback and research. So whilst this is probably the lightest of the pieces in the framework, this actually brings a lot of it together. So what it does is it almost reviews everything you did in understanding what's useful, understanding what's meaningful, understanding the technology, and understanding your staff, and it brings that all together and really then applies your organizational values and mission statements on top. And that's pretty foundational. And then once you've done that, it's about prioritization. And the really thing here is really prioritize. So everything cannot be a priority. You cannot say, well, we need to go live with everything. It's not realistic. Okay. You'll end up demoralized, you'll end up stagnating, and nothing will actually get done. So I always kind of recommend the just again to take a step back. Again, don't apply emotion to this either, because again, that emotion and bias can really I appreciate we need to be passionate about what we do, but it's about ensuring you're looking at the strategy first and about lasting implementation and change, because if your staff do not adopt things, then again it's a point of failure. So when you focus on a roadmap, some things you can do is actually look at the easiest improvements first. So you don't just look at what can we do, you look at like kind of, well, how long would that take? Let's look at the actual effort. And if you're like a scrum person or a DevOps person, go ahead and use your DevOps to go ahead and do this and start to really get down in the detail if you really want to. There's nothing bad in doing that. But once you've done this and looked at the easy improvements, then start to look at things like the hardest or the most expensive improvements, because budget will come into the discussion. I did say it will come in there somewhere, and you do need to look at how much money the company is willing to spend to implement the customer service strategy. And again, this is about understanding that going back to that very first slide that we looked at, your service is absolutely essential to enabling the other areas of the business. If you have terrible service, someone, even if you manage to get a sale, they will not buy from you again. And that's kind of bad if you have a subscription type model service, because it means that they're going to cancel the first opportunity they get. But then also going forward, we still are sharing about that brand image. We still care about word of mouth and other things. It's not a sustainable business model, basically. So have a look at those most expensive improvements, because you may actually find budget for business justification. Get real good at creating business cases. It's something that I did very early on as well, even as a consultant, and it will help you. And if you don't know how to make a business case, just Google it. There's lots of tutorials on how to do it, and then you'll find your own way and your own style. You do need to tailor your approach for business cases depending on organization and who you're talking to and who you're trying to persuade. So there's a lot of different things I could recommend offline for that and how to get started with that. But this is very much about how and where you start to construct your business case. And then really then one of the things to then do once you've got that information is then looking at the improvements which offer the absolute most value, and define what value looks like. Don't be the person on the call that doesn't ask that question, because value for everyone on the call right now will be different for each other, because a value for a supervisor is going to be different for value for an actual customer service agent on the phone for 8 or 12 hours a day answering 100 calls. It's going to be completely different. So you need to be looking at what would offer the most value, what actually is that value, and who is that value for. Okay, and really again how that ties into fulfilling the mission of the organization. So I said it was a light one, but it's got some heavy hitting concepts in that one. So we've looked at organizational values and mission statements. Let's finish up on KPIs, and I've got a note in there on purpose. And I 100% recommend you do not start with KPIs. And the other thing is that because a lot of people don't even know why they're tracking them. A lot of people think, hey, yeah, I've got CSAT, this is great, but they don't do anything with it. So we're going to cover KPIs last, and this is a really interesting one. So understand some core KPIs. So the big thing here is about defining your KPIs for your organization. And when you do this, you're actually going to be, again, leveraging everything you've done in the previous steps, your values, experience, the ability, and then looking at what KPIs are actually relevant for that. And by doing so, what you will end up doing is doubling up. So what I mean by that is actually looking at both that supervisor or even management level, higher than that as well, and then also at the operational level, because essentially a lot of the KPIs will actually kind of almost be work like a tower. They'll actually be your agent KPIs will actually feed your supervisor KPIs, and your supervisor KPIs will actually then feed your organizational APIs, KPIs, sorry, not APIs. I'm in like developer mode. So to do this, again, your toolbox, what do you need? You need to, again, look at all of the stuff that you've previously done, what's important to the organization, and define that KPI. A good thing to do is talk to your stakeholders, talk to the people funding your projects, talk to the people that are funding you as like who are paying your salary, and really say, hey, what's important to you? Like, what's success look like to you, and how do you measure that? And then when you do this, you'll be answering your own question, but a lot of people still do not understand this. They just think, oh, that's a KPI, cool. And they don't actually know what it means and how it's tracked. So you really need to have a defined way of tracking KPIs. And then also then, if you really don't know where to start with key performance indicators, go ahead and look at common ones in the industry. Don't stop there, would be my recommendation, but go ahead and use them for inspiration. I've got some on the next slide that will probably be useful for you. So these are the common KPIs for customer service, and kind of they're broaching in call centers as well, because call centers are a common scenario for customer service. But I've kind of grouped them. I've grouped them into feedback and satisfaction, time, and operations. So they all I can't say one's more important than the other, but you also shouldn't be focusing on all of them in one area either, because you need a good breadth of all of these KPIs from an organizational perspective. And some are older than others as well. And what I mean by that is things such as, and this is where KPIs that can be also very damaging, is that things like if you want to try to reduce the time that an agent's on a call or managing a session, if it's not a phone call, if it's something like a live chat session, is that what you could be doing by accident is actually forcing that agent to quickly resolve the query just because it's quicker, and not actually resolving the query. And then what you can then end up doing is increasing your number of cases and increasing then all your averages, just because you've got a KPI that actually doesn't mean anything, or at least it doesn't help or serve your organization. So just be very mindful of how your KPIs actually interact with each other. Some are dependent on others, especially things like when you look at the averages and stuff like that, you actually need to know your actual number of cases and all that kind of good stuff. But things like understand the difference between CSAT and NPS. Net Promoter Score is completely different, where it's about, would you recommend this organization? It's not necessarily about an instance of service. So, you've got to really think, if you've not in an organization, if they've not got something like a chief experience officer or someone who manages these kind of programs, it's always just good to probably check in with your customers maybe once a quarter or something like that, to ensure that you've got your NPS. And then also your CSAT is more of a situational piece, like, hey, what would you rate this experience out of 5? And there's a few different ways that you can do that. Again, Forms Pro is a really good way of doing that, but I'll cover that shortly. I know I've not got too long left. I'll try and wrap up soon. And then, so yeah, I'm not going to cover these too much. In terms of some of the operations piece, like I said, this is the operations falls more on the supervisor side of things, but things such as just like SLA compliance is actually managed in Customer Service Hub. So let's just take a look at how these then link to the actual technologies that we've covered today, or at least a few of them. So you can kind of see then, this is just a simple exercise that you can do as an organization. Where are your KPIs actually being calculated? You can see Customer Engagement Hub, whilst it's basic, there was a reason why I started with that, is that you cannot really start with self-service or PVA or Forms Pro without you having foundational case management. And that really feeds all the other stuff as well. Now, I can, like I said, I'm not going to stop going on about customer service insights. You can see, I couldn't even put all of the KPIs that you can track in CSI on the slide. So it's customer service insights is like a no-brainer for reporting, but it obviously doesn't do everything. It doesn't do some stuff like case deflection, and also things like number of initiations for your PVA bot. So that can technically probably be found in Omnichannel, but again, it's something that you need to be very mindful and ensuring that your technology is working for you. So we've looked at KPIs, and really, this is your toolbox. This is your toolbox for defining at least a very basic customer service strategy for you, so that you can create these useful and meaningful experiences for customers. And I just wanted to really end on some recommended implementations and how to use that framework that we've covered to really then go ahead and create some really tailored experiences for your organization, whether it's your actual organization or if you're working as a consultant or a partner for that organization. So I kind of split customers into three parts generally. You've either got, it's a re-implementation, you're new to Microsoft or Microsoft Online, moving from on-prem, and you want to look at kind of really creating this customer service strategy. You already have a decent customer service game, or you want to go into the new age of some fancy machine learning and some really awesome stuff. Now, we're going to leave that third part. I'm not interested in that third part. I want to help the other two right now. So we're going to look at really these two scenarios just very quickly. So the first one is then the re-implementations. And this is how would you use this framework in this scenario? So this is how I would recommend you really using it. So you would, again, because you're starting out, because you're re-implementing as well, it's always a good thing to just take a quick look at those organizational values and mission statements, because they actually do kind of change over time sometimes, especially with change in CEOs. You can even just see that just from Microsoft. And so by ensuring that you've got a good handle of that, you can then look and start to profile your customers and start to profile your staff so that you understand what's useful and meaningful for both of them. And then you can start to understand your KPIs. So it's a really good way of getting a really baseline structure before you go into your technology. Now, in contrast, if you were to then look at someone, if you're an organization that you're like, I'm already online, I'm already on 9.0, I'm just looking to improve, I would always still recommend to go back and be like, well, let's profile our customers. Let's just kind of understand who we're trying to serve here, and then look at that organizational capability in your staff, and then look at your technology. I definitely think a technology refresh is always needed, because if this is the first time an organization is really looking for redoing their customer service or looking to improve, it's quite often that you've probably not kept up to date on some of the technology that is available that we've covered in this session today. So by doing so, you're actually coming, again, you're removing your biases by looking at what's useful and what's meaningful first for your customer, not for you, for your customer, then for your staff, and then understanding the technology that's available and start to then map that out and then go into the other pieces. So I really hope that's been useful. I really, just to kind of look at what we've covered, I've tried to give you a framework of really how to develop that customer service strategy for your organization. And that's both as, again, like I said, if you're inside the organization and it's yours, or you're a consultant or working with a partner to go ahead and do that, because we do have a responsibility as architects and consultants to ensure that we're pushing this, because we can't just go ahead and be like, oh, you want to implement the phone channel? Sure, okay, no problem, and just go off and do it. it's our job to go ahead and provide those recommendations. And I just wanted to give a shout out to some really great content creators on each of these separate areas. So especially for USD, so Trisha is awesome. She's been doing some really cool omnichannel engagement. Neil Parker as always does great USD content, but he actually also has some great CTI integration pieces too. He actually goes through CTI integration in depth. And Kirill as well, he hasn't, I don't think he's done too much content recently, but he actually has some soft phone examples and some other stuff that you can hook up with Omnichannel. So I definitely would recommend Googling him. Of course, Nicholas, you did a great job with Omnichannel as well. Please check out Nicholas's blog and details too. Megan Walker does amazing stuff on Forms Pro. She's actually got a great course on Forms Pro and some great blog content. So if you wanted to get started with Forms Pro, I would always recommend Megan's content. And Nick and Colin, for those of you who don't know either of those, so they're both Canadians. And I'm not biased, honestly, just because I've moved here. But Colin actually he used to work for ADX Studio, right? So he literally is portals for Colin. So I would 100% recommend Colin's content. And Nick is like the portal guy. He does great content, and actually again also has a course on portals. So definitely go and check these people out. These are really great great content creators in all of these areas that I've covered in the session today. So I know that I'm probably a little bit out of time, so I'll totally answer some questions in chat, but hopefully you found it useful. And I'll definitely be sticking around for the next 30 minutes or an hour to answer any questions anyway in chat.
Thank you, Sarah. It was really informative session, to be honest, and a lot of to take within this 1 hour. So absolutely enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Raz, are you back?
Hello, everybody. Thanks again, Sarah. I managed to catch Sarah's session, and as usual, it was very highly intensive and very entertaining. And I think everyone is just downloading the information. So thanks again, Sarah, for that great session. There's not any questions.